All right, he's a CEO, entrepreneur, outlier, overcomer, father, brother, and underdog too. I'm talking about my husband, Glenn Stearns, and this is Grit Happens.
All right.
Woo! I love to say it. Grit Happens. Do you like it when I get gritty?
You're getting good at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think you like
that.
I've developed my grit since we've been in quarantine together.
Yeah. No one wants to see that grit.
When
Trust
it's
me.
raw. What are you saying? Get a little gritty in your face, honey?
Getting locked up together for too long.
I'll show you my gritties.
Oh, God. So,
Anyway, go ahead.
please. No, I'm excited because I have a dear friend of mine that I want to share with everybody. That speaking of grit and speaking of been through a lot together and on his own. So
I think that would you're just before you right now we do a lot of stories about you. We've gone over your background. We've expressed who you are. People know you from the show on Discovery, but your rise has not been an easy one. And along the way, you've always said, "I surround myself with the best people," and that's part of your success. And I think this is one of those people in your circle that is incredibly important.
well, and as I said on the first couple shows, I'm excited about introducing people to people that I've surrounded myself with. Of why I think I've been able to, kind of navigate through some waters has been because of a lot of the people that have done it either before me, the same time as me, alongside of me, or on their own. So Steve Bilt
Yes, good
is
friend.
a very good friend, and we talked before about YPO and the importance of that in my life. And
Now, YPO is the Young Presidents Organization. You've been
That's
part of
right.
that for 15 years now, 14 years.
and and one of that tight group of 10 that we were, and talking about getting to know each other. Steve is in that group, and one of my closest and dearest friends. Steve runs a company called Smile Brands. He's got 425 or more, and counting, shall we say, dental practices across the country. And Steve, are you there?
Steve is
We got
here.
ya.
Let's
I
have
am
Steve
here.
Bilt is
All
in the
right.
house, everybody.
There he is.
Give you some fanfare. There's a big studio audience here.
There you go.
Inside the computer.
Well, I'm happy to have you on, Steve. We again, we've talked about a lot of stories, and many times you've been in the middle of those stories, and really today, kind of what we want to talk about is, life is not perfect, right? Life is not something that goes along a plan, and when you get done, you look back and go, wow, that went exactly the way I thought it would go. We kind of want to talk about Plan B. What happens when life doesn't go exactly the way that we'd like it to go,
As planned.
as planned?
Yeah.
He takes a big, deep sigh, like, yeah, Glenn, I know about that.
Exactly. I mean,
No doubt.
I would take, if you don't mind, kind of, walk us through a little bit of your past, and a little bit about what you do now.
Well, I started my career on a very safe route, actually, as a CPA by training. And so that's about the biggest risk mitigating path you can probably take. And somehow, some way, at a reasonably young age, was the CFO of a company that was in some financial trouble. And, candidly, that was the only kind of company that was probably crazy enough to take a 32-year-old CPA and say you could be the guy to run it. And so suddenly I had a chance to run it, and had seen it a little bit from the inside as the CFO, and knew that there were some broken relationships and had a gut feel for how to fix that. And so dug in deep and developed some really good relationships inside the company with, in this case, our doctors, and really had a turnaround in that business much faster than I probably could have reasonably expected. And suddenly that put me in a position to where we were able to triple the size of the company and then double the size of it again. And then, X number of years later, I'm sitting there going, wow, I kind of got the hang of this operating thing, and I've taken on some interesting challenges. And, I feel like I've got I wouldn't say I got the market cornered on it, but I feel like I understand it and have had some success and have a brand in my sector. And then about a year after that, after a couple of successful sales, I got a call and got fired. And then all of a sudden looked up and said, wow, that's a bit of a wake up call, and kind of had to rebuild from there. in a lot of ways. So that would be it in a nutshell, in terms of the first chapter.
Right.
And
And that's important because I think
it.
taking it from right there for a second, right? We have so many of us that are set. We know where we're going and everything is headed in the right direction. Right on down to our economy, where nothing's going to get in our way. And then something out of left field just hits us, right? And we don't expect it. I mean, we've done it all right, so we think, but then something comes that is out of our control, and that to me is the difference at that point. How your attitude, your mind, and your resources, and your determination and grit, that's the difference between who ends up making it or who ends up making, themselves a, I don't know, just some kind of a, what's the word I'm looking for? Just an excuse for why the world, imploded on them. They're a victim, right? So what happened at that point in your life?
Well, it's interesting. And you touched on something that I think is really important for the story when you go through stuff like this, which is, there's occasions where something happens and it's out of left field because your ego and your behavior blinded you to something, and therefore it hits you out of left field or hits you like a 2x4 where the world said, I don't like you all that much right now, and I'm going to teach you a lesson. And so, there's a power when that happens in being honest with yourself and saying, I created this and how do I fix it? Then there's other times like, candidly what we're going through right now where, there is no moral hazard. No one created the COVID-19 crisis we're in the middle of right now. But all of a sudden that hits you. And there's a power in facing that honestly too and saying, hey, I didn't necessarily do this, but I do have to accept it and figure out a way through it. And so I think the first step in it is really being honest with yourself, and in the context of getting fired, that was because I took my eye off the ball, for the most part, and allowed that to happen. And so the first step in kind of getting through it was accepting, right, that it happened for these reasons, and I had a part in it. Other times you could have something that hits you and it wasn't your fault at all. That doesn't mean you don't have to go through it. And you obviously have some incredible stories around that personally on both sides, where you probably made some of it and some of it just was because that's the way life happened. I think both are kind of critical to getting through something
right
like that.
You're right. I mean, acceptance of either what is in your control or what isn't in your control, right? Both. And I think that when we look at our lives and we blame the outside world or we blame ourselves even, I don't think any of it does any good, right? It's about the matter of looking inward, definitely seeing what we can fix and what we can do better, but it's about moving forward again. It's not about sitting back and being the victim.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've watched you go through that, right? So you've got things that happen that are, totally fair because you brought them on yourself. And that means you got to accept responsibility, and that conditions you or positions you to move forward. And then you've got things that have hit you personally that they weren't your fault, but if you don't accept them, then you're not on the road forward. And so, that's been a lesson, candidly. A couple of things have happened for me, in getting fired. It was funny because, one of the things that you always say is, there's no line at the merry-go-round, the line's at the roller coaster. And, candidly, up until the point where I got let go, I had been through a successful early career. I'd taken over in this operating role, candidly not really knowing what I was doing, but having more success than I probably should have, and selling the company a couple times and, constructing a pretty decent story on paper, for sure. And then that happened. It's like, wow, I really have to step back and lick my wounds for a while and then decide what to do. And then move forward with an understanding of where I went right in the past and where I went wrong in the past. And part of it too, right, when something like that happens and it's bad, is we tend to try to categorize things as all one thing or all the other. And the reality is that I had a really good career up until that point and did a lot of things right and did a few things wrong, and that led to a setback. And moving forward, it was remembering what had went well and settling into that mind space, and then remember what went poorly, accepting what went poorly, and then figuring out how not to go into that place again. So that was really part of what I, candidly learned along the way. It's like you've shared this with me a bunch of times, but it's like, what you have is your story, and it's a better story having had that setback and come back from it than it would be if it was just like, well, everything went great, lived happily ever after, and that was super boring, and then I died.
Right.
So it really was a great opportunity to live it and add some real texture
some meat to your story,
experience.
Right? So before we move on to plan B, part B of that, I got a question for you. Is there a difference between a CEO and an entrepreneur?
It's funny. I think there is, but I personally think entrepreneurs get screwed up by that a lot, thinking that it's something different, like that a CEO is totally different. I think as a CEO or an entrepreneur, you do what needs to be done for your business. As an entrepreneur, if you think about starting out, that's kind of like everything. You do it all, right? As a CEO, assuming your company's grown, and so therefore you have that title, not because you just gave it to yourself and you're your only employee, but because you actually have people around you, more so perhaps, then you're spending more time leading than you are doing. So if there's maybe a dividing line, it's like the entrepreneur is kind of doing everything and the CEO is trying to get more out of the people around him or her, is the way I tend to think about it. The challenge, I think, for a lot of people moving through the ranks that become CEOs, whether they're entrepreneurs or, line people, is that you actually get promoted by being a really good doer. So you get really good at doing things, therefore you get promoted, or your business gets more successful as an entrepreneur. And then all of a sudden, as a CEO, your job's about leading and getting more out of people and making sure they're getting more out of themselves than they thought possible. I think that's maybe where the classical distinction comes in between the two.
And I say that because, again, there's a lot of people that listen and they are budding entrepreneurs or want to be CEOs, right? They're not quite there yet. And I see a big difference because I always had ideas, and then I tried to gather a lot of people together and say, let's go charge the hill together and make a company, right? But I never thought of myself as a good CEO, right? Because I didn't like to get the people, I like to get the people motivated, but I didn't like holding them accountable as much. Okay. So if this makes sense what I'm saying. So I found other people that became the president of the company and became other positions, COO, that would do a lot of that work. And I could still then charge the hill as a bigger thinker, but not one that holds people's feet to the fire. You, on the other hand, are very good at both, at really laying it out very methodically and then being able to motivate the people and hold them accountable. I mean, you are like the true definition of a CEO, and I've watched you back then. I saw where maybe you went a little off to your point, and then I've seen you now on your second wave here, so to speak. Just do it again, but do it much more focused and having great results,
So I have a thought on that. I'll come right back to it in terms of what's different with me as a CEO this time. But I want to go back to that point of the CEO entrepreneur thing, because I think it's a lot of times people start businesses, they have great passion. I watch you do this. You have more instincts in your business than anyone I've ever met in any business as it relates to their business. You know it like the back of your hand. You know what to do. You know when to press the gas. You know when to back off. All the big decisions, the real existential decisions, you know how to make those because you just do. You know the business like nobody, right? Then all of a sudden you go, oh, I don't hold people accountable, or I didn't come from this, particular discipline or that. I probably shouldn't be the CEO. I probably don't have it. I think that's off. To me, that's just BS, right? I think you get someone who knows how to guide that organization to where it should be, and you know where it should be. Yeah, sure. We all have some gap, right? We didn't come through every discipline. We don't know every element. But at the end, the entrepreneur is the one who holds the beating heart of that business and knows it. And that person can always succeed, in my opinion, driving that company if they can keep their ego in check.
Right.
And they can allow them to surround themselves with people who can help them, but they can't abdicate to those people because those people just don't feel the heartbeat of that company the way that entrepreneur does, in my mind. So I think there's cases, I'm sure, but way more often than not, if that entrepreneur can, again, keep that ego in check and open up to the fact that you just can't do every single thing for the company, and you can't be in the middle of every decision. If you're good at this, you want people to operate on their own, then I think you can do both at virtually any size.
I have a question for you guys.
Which,
oh, sorry, I didn't know you.
Sure.
Go ahead. Finish your thought.
Oh, no, I was going to say, the second part what I was going to say is, for me coming back to the business, the big difference was simply that when I was gone, remember I said, boy, remember what you did well, remember what experiences were good, remember which ones weren't, and then really remember what you miss. And candidly, when I was out, what I missed was big problems and solving them as a team and then moving forward. But my first iteration through, when someone brought me a big problem, I'd be kind of grumpy about it. Like, it is almost like a defense mechanism where if you're a little grumpy when someone brings you a problem, maybe you won't get so many problems brought to you. But then you learn in business, of course, that doesn't mean the problems go away. It means you just don't know about them. So when I came back this time, I just said, you know what? I came back to solve problems. I came back to take on these challenges. So when someone brings me a challenge, I'm going to say, awesome. That's what I came back for. Let's dig in and solve this. And that was like one of these checkpoints that I had. And I said, just remind myself to do that. And now, I've been back for, I don't know, it's coming up 4 years now. And I managed to keep that mindset because I just committed to it. That was the one big change. I said, look, when we have problems, bring them to me because I want to solve them with you. And it was a big difference for me going through it this time. And I will tell you, for me, it's made it a lot more fun, right? Because those challenges are fun and you get through them. You're going to get through them. Been through big ones. You get through them, right? And that confidence to do it and that willingness to embrace those challenges then has made people, in my opinion, much more effective in their roles because they take on those challenges. They're not afraid of them, not afraid to bring it up. They're not afraid to collaborate with me or peers on these things. And it's made us a lot better.
Yeah. You see, you said that the challenges were fun now. And what again, a little more background for the folks at home is, the company that you got fired by, you turned around with the private equity group and rebought the same company, and took it back up to be a huge success again, called Bright Now, or Small Brands, used to be Bright Now.
Small Brands, yep.
And and a little similar story here with me. If you recall, I sold my business off. It had its issues, and when I could get back in because I had a non-compete that ended, I not only got back in, but went to the same building I had for 20 years. It used to be my old building, went to the same floor and my same office, and I'm taking down that old sign and putting up the new one. So there's something to be said about redemption and wanting to go back into something. And so I think, again, a lot of times when people trip, when they fall, when problems happen, the plan B might be about, I'm going to do it bigger and better, right? And it motivates us to really do something. And I think it's really healthy. A lot of people don't realize it, but it's healthy to fall. It's healthy to have, a fire under you that is burning because of something else you're going to prove and you're going to show, and those things, even like, I don't think you don't want to live in misery over something. You want to live and fuel it and use it as a positive way to get up in the morning and go charge the hill again, and again, I think people at home need to realize that and sit and not look at the problem, but look at the solution and say this time, and just allow themselves to feel good about it.
Yeah. I've been toying with that concept, of this, what makes the fire burn. And I think it's, you're honest with yourself about what happened. And then I've toyed with this, this whole concept of revenge, they say revenge is a dish best served cold. And I've toyed with, or is it a dish just better served to the dog and keep it away, right? Because is it really revenge, like coming back and showing people, or is it like, God, I just missed being in the battle with people who were fighting for this same cause, or I missed, being able to impact people's lives because this business does this, or, and so, you say you get someone a mortgage who otherwise wouldn't get it. Wow, that is really cool. And to do that against the big boys and make sure you get people, into a home, that's, I miss doing that. Or in our case, we're providing care to people who otherwise wouldn't get it. And, we're solving big problems in our industry because 60% of the country doesn't get dental care. And so how do we go after that? So I think it's really tapping into what it is that you missed about that business when it was so right for you, when you were in your flow, if you will. And so, for me, it was taking on some of these big challenges and solving them and expanding the business somewhere people got care, and we're very purpose driven in what we do. And so that what drew me back. And so for me, it was, how do I stay in that place?
Right.
And I don't think there's any wrong motivation. It's really just, what is that sustainable motivation? And then how do you stay there? How do you check back into that and manage to stay there? And that was what I had to really commit to for myself, because it kind of got away from me after a while. I was in the same role for 15 years in the company.
I absolutely agree with you. But what I was, I guess, talking about was a lot of times when we fall and then we're in this slump, right? We're down in the hole and it's hard to get back out. So whatever that takes to get you out of the hole, if it is being grateful, if it is about redemption, if it is about, all those things, whatever gets you back there. But I absolutely agree with you. From that point on, now you've got it rolling again. It's got to be about joyfulness. It's got to be about the desire, the happiness of what you're doing, because you're doing it for the majority of what your life is. You're going there 10 days and 10 hours a day. So you need to find the joy in that, right? And if it's built on anger, and if it's built on, trying to have some kind of revenge, I think you're in the wrong place at that point. But I'm saying we get ourselves out of a hole, get out of there, get motivated somehow, and then find your joy, right? Find what it is to feel grateful about bringing those people together and solving the issues and all those kind of things.
There's a great quote that I was reading. It says, "True redemption is seized when you accept the future consequences for your past mistakes." And I think what you're talking about too is like, you're not avoiding what happened. You're not negating it. You're using it, and you realize you've made choices along the way. And so there's consequences, but you go forward in spite of those consequences, and you overcome them.
Well, that's Steve just said that. He said, I got fired.
Right.
He's not happy saying it, but you're not happy to say you got fired unless you have figured a way to make it back up.
But that's accepting it and moving on.
And accepting it.
So no, I was going to say, and this is the thread we were pulling earlier, is, things happen in life, and sometimes they're because you created them, and your quote was perfect. You accept that, what, the future consequences of that, I'm living with those, and I'll move forward from. Other times, like we're right now in this world, and I've been sharing with my team, we were on the edge of this, this canyon and this beautiful view, and we were looking out probably in the opposite direction, saying, wow, it's gorgeous. And, maybe took a step backwards and fell into this canyon that's called the COVID-19 crisis right now. And, we slid fast and hard. Our business dropped 80% in about 3 days. And, that's an interesting situation too, because you crash down the hill, you land on the bottom of the canyon floor, and, bones are broken and you're in pain. And it's like, I didn't do this, but I'm here, and, I have an opportunity to lick my wounds for a while, gather some resources. And now I got to climb back out the other side of this canyon. It's going to be a long climb, and I got to make sure I do it. And it's one foot in front of the other until I get there. And, that's acceptance also, which is like, it's not just going to bounce back. I'm not getting picked up by a helicopter.
Yeah, no one's throwing you a line. No one's throwing you a safety line.
There's no helicopter, nothing. Yep. It's got to gather supplies, gather energy, and just start climbing back out. And, Glenn and I, one of the first things we ever did together, I think, you might have been there, was at the Nando Parado deal.
Yes.
And his saying was, you know what, I'm going to take one more step.
That's it.
That's not the step where I die. I can take one more, and I can take one more. And sometimes that's it. He didn't create that crash, but he had to, just accept the circumstances.
And Nando
you live
Parado.
in denial, you'll die.
Well, I
just to elaborate, that's the guy from the movie Alive with the Andes plane crash. Just for those that don't know, Nando Parado, but very important movie and a powerful speaker.
He was amazing.
Probably one of the best.
But I will tell you, Steve, that if I worked, you have nearly 4,000 employees for a company.
5,500, yeah.
Oh, 5,500. Sorry,
wow.
I underestimated by 1,500. But if I had 5,500 employees, I would want no one better than you to be leading that team. I mean, I've witnessed him at his summit. And, look, we're all going through it. So there's no blame, to your point, that it's one organization or another. It's going to be, how do we get ourselves back out of it? How do you get your company back on top? Like everybody else has got to think of that, and they've got to be a problem solver. And so, I am confident, because we're going to get back, but we're going to get back with the right leaders and the ones that understand how to figure out their situation, and you're going to figure that one out.
So Steve and Glenn, both, do you think, along the lines, you're both entrepreneurs, you both have had success in falling into that canyon, pulling yourself back up again. To speak to the everyday person who's like, well, I'm not an entrepreneur. Are you born an entrepreneur? Are you molded into an entrepreneur? Is it a mindset that you have just because it's who you are, or do you create an entrepreneurial mindset? And is this something like you talk to the everyday person who's on their back right now? So is it a mindset that you choose? How do you feel that these people who are really feeling like, wow, everything has been taken? What do you tell them?
Want to take a stab at it?
Well, Glenn's a guy you could probably drop off with $100 and a cell phone with no contacts in it. He could probably build a business.
You think?
So that's just a good idea. So he's an entrepreneur. There's no question about that. So I don't know. I personally, I think it's something you can learn. I mean, I started as a CPA, for God's sakes, which is the most risk limiting of all probably professional choices.
And look at you now.
That's not an entrepreneurial mindset. Glenn, has that, but I think you can pick up lessons along the way. And if you're into something you're passionate about, it's accepting your circumstances. And then I think a lot of times being an entrepreneur is the Nando Parado story, which is, I may die, but this wasn't my last step.
Right.
I've got another one in me.
I agree with you.
And a lot of times it's just that.
And I think that is, you can look at it in a job, or you can look at it in life, right? Because we all get into funks, all of us. And it doesn't have to be about a job. It can be just with our wives, with our families, with our health, with, cleaning up the backyard. I mean, we get into funks, and it takes that first step, right? And you got to keep stepping, just like Nando Parado said. No matter what it is, you got to get off your butt and just do it, And that's the first step, and that's the hardest step usually, is just saying, I will do it now. And, most people have asked you, me, a lot of people, like, how did you get here? It's like, and just took the first step, and I kept going, and and
sometimes that first step, I think, is the hardest one to take.
No, it absolutely
because
is.
once you go, then you have momentum.
That's right.
And that's what Nando Parado, his book Miracle in the Andes, it basically highlights that whole story. And I'd have to say, I would surmise, Steve, that you agree, and Glenn, that his speech, his presentation was one of probably the most compelling I have ever listened to in the history of speakers. Probably. And
I think we listened to him 15 years ago.
Yep.
Talking about it
it was probably about 15 years ago.
That'll give you some.
The other one that we need to have on also is Dr. Beck Weathers.
Beck Weathers and Joe Simpson.
And Joe Simpson.
Joe's someone
Those
who
guys.
didn't expect a line. Joe was in The Gentleman Into the Void, there's a documentary, who fell into a crevasse, and he knew no one was coming to get him.
Yeah.
And he took one crawl.
So we got to...
Those are some good ones. So... Well, you know what, Steve? We have so appreciated you join us today, and really diving into what it takes to take that step towards Plan B. You two are both men that I admire immensely, because it sees why you guys are equally, your friendship, you attracted one to another, and I love to see the friendship between you, and it shows also how important that is to have people in your life that are going to help elevate and push you there. You've been there for Glenn's cancer struggles. You've always been by it. So you guys have had your the challenges in your businesses and lives, and you guys have always been there for each other, and I love seeing that.
Been through a lot, good and bad.
Well, I've definitely learned a lot from Glenn. These lessons help for sure. I promise. I don't think he knows most of what he's taught me, but yeah, I pick it up from him. I promise. So,
Don't ever give the man a
is
knife and next to a tree. That's all I can say.
Oh, come on. I think your name is carved somewhere in a lone tree on some remote island somewhere in Fiji. You will be forever immortalized.
I think that grew over in like 10 minutes.
I
don't
think it did
lasted
too.
at all.
It's gone. You've been gone like the footprints in the sand. You're wiped away. Well, we have so appreciated you sitting down with Glenn on Grit Happens. You can subscribe on Apple and YouTube and check out Glenn's more of his episodes. And Steve Bilt of Smile Brands, thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate your insight.
Thank you so much.
And perspective.
That's right.
Any parting words, my dear?
No, I love you, Steve. Thank you for everything. You're one of my dearest friends, and you've got a lot of talent. So I'm really glad you came on, and I'm sorry we only have 30 minutes because people start falling asleep and getting bored after about that. So I think, we could have probably stretched it, but Mama knows best. So
there we go. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, and we will see you soon.
all right.
All right. And then we'll
you,
see you
Steve.
next time. Well, excited to have you, Glenn. Thanks, honey. I'll see you at home.
That's right.
Between the sheets. We'll see you next
All right,
time
take
on
care.
Grit Happens.